Well, shalom, shalom. Welcome to Tuesday night Bible study. We just came through the season of Sukkot where it's like every night, and then it's hard to get back in the schedule of what day it actually is. But here we are. I wanted to get into a little bit of subject. I think we touched on it briefly on Sabbath about the season that we're in and the seriousness of the times. We talk about the seriousness of the times a lot, and I think sometimes it's like, well, we kind of want to hear something else for a change, but things are intensifying, and I think at sometimes because it's easy to get used to anything, and we can get so used to it that it becomes like background noise about the seriousness of the times we're living in and the craziness that's going on out there. But if something's not good for us, we need to know about it. We need to know why it's not good. We need to know that it's not good so that we don't walk into it. There's a reason why, even in the natural, chemical companies, they have to have warning labels on their chemicals. On their bottles to tell, every building. I work at an assisted living. We have to have SDS sheets, safety data sheets, and the book is like this thick because you have to list every single chemical that's in the building and the safety data sheet, what its toxicity is, if it's toxic to your lungs, if it's toxic when you touch it, and it has listed out all these different facts about the chemicals. So if somebody comes into contact with it who's not supposed to, then you go to the safety data sheet to find out what the treatment would be, what you need to be aware of. And so some chemicals are corrosive. We know bleach can be corrosive. It's corrosive to your skin. It can eat away at stuff. There's others that are toxic when they're breathed. You don't want to breathe in. You really don't want to breathe in a lot of chemicals. Just saying, you don't want to be breathing a lot of bleach. I remember I had a client at one point that I was cleaning for, and she wanted me to clean her entire bathroom with bleach, straight bleach, no ventilation. And I would leave there, and like my nose was burning afterwards, and I could smell bleach in my nose for hours. Well, you're not supposed to be breathing in the bleach fumes in that concentration. But some chemicals have warnings not to get into your eyes or can cause blindness and different things. Others are at danger for exploding under certain conditions, so you want to be aware of those ones for sure, because that can pose a hazard not just to you but everybody else around you. And so some chemicals cause extremely toxic fumes if they're mixed together, like bleach and ammonia. I mean, most people should know about that. Some people aren't as aware of it. Remember back at the height of the pandemic, we had the supposedly smart people. Let's start fogging the entire building with this highly toxic chemical to kill whatever might be floating around in the air. Never mind that you might kill people in the process by that rather than the actual pandemic, but that's beside the point. But we go in there afterwards and start cleaning with our normal chemicals and wondering, why does this smell so bad? Well, we started realizing that what they're fogging the building with is bleach. It's chlorine based, and what we're cleaning with is ammonia based. So we said, well, we can't be doing this. We're not going to have our housekeeping staff passing out on the job, because then you're not going to have anyone to clean. So you got to be aware of those. And what you don't know about a chemical can cause serious damage. Some people say what you don't know can't hurt you. That's the furthest thing from the truth. What you don't know could kill you. It doesn't matter. Electricity is not a respecter of persons. It doesn't say, well, you don't know that sticking a fork in the socket could electrocute you, so I'm not going to choose to take you out at this point. No, it's an equal opportunity thing. Whether you know it or you don't know it, the consequences are still there. And some extreme cases, it could cost you your life. But when you look at some of the warning labels that are on some things, it makes you wonder, because they put the warning labels on there for a reason. And usually it's because someone has tried it before. We thought that we were going to be in a generation that had invented flying cars, but instead in the manual it says don't drink the battery acid. Where are we in this day and age? So I found this list of like really interesting warning labels that are on things, kind of humorous. So this is the warning label on a sleeping pill. Warning may cause drowsiness. That's kind of the point of a sleeping pill. It's to make you tired so you fall asleep. Chainsaw, warning, do not hold the wrong end of the chainsaw. Yeah, no kidding. Jet ski. Though this one is interesting. On a jet ski, there was a warning label, never use a lit match or an open flame to check the fuel level. Like if you have to be told that, you should not be anywhere near a jet ski. Maybe you should stay in your house. Like seriously, you're a danger to yourself anywhere you go. Hair dryer, you know, we always see the labels on the hair dryer, don't use while in the bathtub. Like I'm just getting this picture of somebody sitting in the bathtub taking a bath, drying their hair, like why? But one hairdryer had on its label, do not use while sleeping. Apparently there's an epidemic of people who are walking around sleep drying their hair, you know, instead of sleepwalking. Don't know. Reflective sunshade for the window, you know, that keeps the sun out in the summertime so your car doesn't get too hot. It said do not drive with the sun shield in place. Yeah. Oh, no kidding. Carton of eggs. This product may contain eggs. Yep. So this is the society we're living in, where you're literally having to state the obvious, mainly to avoid lawsuits. That's why they put them on there. Hey, I bought a carton of eggs. I didn't know it contained eggs in it. Like, I don't know. Just strange. Cup of hot coffee. Warning, contents may be hot. That's what you're buying it for. Folding pack and play, you know, remove child before folding. I don't really want to know what child experienced their parent trying to fold it up with them inside of it, but hey. Wheelbarrow, not intended for highway use. I mean, that's a whole new game. Like, I picture somebody with their racing helmet on and their goggles. Let's go racing down the highway in our wheelbarrow. Do not iron clothes while wearing. Curling iron, warning, this product can burn eyes. Like, what is somebody trying to curl their eyelashes with the curling iron? Don't know where that one came from. Clothes hanger, warning, do not swallow. Some of them, it's like, why? Why do we have to put this warning label on things? Like, that's stating the obvious. Yeah, you're not supposed to be swallowing clothes hangers. They're meant to hang your clothes on. There was one machine that said, warning, this machine loves killing humans. If you don't know exactly what you're doing, stay away. That's kind of stating it bluntly. One brand of small tractor simply had a warning on it, warning, avoid death. Yeah, that's the goal of everything. You want to avoid death in whatever you do. No kidding. But we are in a generation where the warnings have to be broken down to literally like a kindergarten level. Like you're speaking to everyone like they're a 3-year-old. I mean, seriously, you have to tell a 3-year-old, don't go drink battery acid, don't go touching a hot object, don't stick your hand on the wrong end of the chainsaw. But you wouldn't expect to have to tell adults that. Maybe they weren't trained as children. But why is it that, you know, and you see buildings, like especially old buildings, if they're being condemned or something, it says danger, keep out. You know, there's signs saying caution, danger, keep out. Why is it that there's like a draw to go there if it says danger, keep out? I mean, how many, I remember like even Little House on the Prairie, where they go exploring like old mines that are broken down and crumbling, and like, what's the draw? This is a dangerous place. You don't want to be there. And then they end up getting in trouble and they have to be rescued out of it. Well, if they just paid attention to the warning sign that said, danger, keep out, they wouldn't have gotten themselves into that situation. So in life, we got to not ignore the warning signs. We got to not ignore the warning labels. But from the beginning of time, humans have been ignoring the warnings all along. And that's why humanity has gotten in the mess it's in now. We've been ignoring the warning labels on life. We've been ignoring the danger, keep out signs. We've been going where we shouldn't be going. We've been associating with things we shouldn't be associating with. We've been touching hot stoves and wondering why we're getting burned. And Yahweh in the beginning told us, you know, what to do and how to handle it. We're in Genesis on Sabbath. We'll turn over to Genesis real quick. Genesis chapter 3. Actually, we'll start at Genesis chapter 2. And this is the first warning label, if you would put it that way, the first warning that Yahweh gave for something back in the very beginning of time. And you think of it, everything was perfect. There was nothing dangerous on the earth. He just had his rule of this is something you don't do. So in Genesis chapter 2, verse 15, it says, "And the Lord God took the man and put him in the Garden of Eden to tend and guard and keep it. And the Lord God commanded the man, saying, You may freely eat of every tree of the garden, but of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, and blessing and calamity, you shall not eat. For in the day that you eat of it, you shall surely die." Now that's a pretty clear warning. Like, don't eat. You can eat of any other tree. I mean, you think of how many trees were in the Garden of Eden. You can eat of any other tree, but this one, you shall not eat of it. For in the day that you eat of it, you shall surely die. Okay? So that's the danger. Keep out. Don't touch it. Don't drink the poison. Whatever you want to say. Keep out. Skip on down to chapter 3, verse 1. Now the devil comes on the scene. "Now the serpent was more subtle and crafty than any living creature of the field which the Lord God had made." Now, subtle and crafty. He's a trickster. He's deceitful. He's going to try to make something look different than it really is. And Satan said to the woman, "Can it really be that God has said, 'You shall not eat from every tree of the garden'?" Now, the devil knew what God had said. He knew what God had really said to them. He's purposely twisting the words to see how the woman's going to respond. He says, "Can it be that God said, 'You shall not eat from every tree of the garden'?" God never said you cannot eat from every tree of the garden. He said you can eat from any tree of the garden except this one. And that's how the enemy works. He's going to try to convince in your mind that God said something that he didn't really say, or to try to make you question what God really said. If he can plant that thought in your mind, then he can get you to start getting into a place of uncertainty. You know, one of the biggest things is when you see people who are being questioned by authority, if say they're going through like a lie detection test or something like that, they'll start questioning them on things that they know. But because of the pressure of the situation, it will make the person start questioning whether they really know it. We've experienced that going to Israel, okay? I flew El Al to Israel one time, and I was flying by myself, and El Al, as we know, is a much stricter airline for a good reason, and they've never had any kind of terrorist happening on their plane, though you know that they would be a target if they could. But because of that, and they're being good protectors of their country, they will question you more than you think is necessary. So, number one, me being a female traveling by myself at the time, didn't know it, but there was a outbreak, if you want to say, of young females traveling to Israel just for the purpose of going and meeting young Arab men. They were getting trapped in situations, and then the IDF was having to go and rescue them. So that's the basis, is if you can prevent them from getting there and getting into the situation, you don't have to go rescue them. So if you're not going to be smart enough to recognize that the situation is not good, we're going to help you, is basically what the questioning is about. So they're suspicious because I'm traveling by myself. I had never been with Hayuvel before, so they ask you, do you know who's picking you up at the airport? Have you personally met them? Well, honestly, no, I hadn't. Well, how did you set up the trip? And then it goes from how did you set up the trip to how did you even hear about them? And then where are you from? And what congregation do you go to? What church do you go to? What's the name of the pastor? What is your occupation? Can you tell me the name of the place you work at? Give me the phone number of the place you work at. What is your business? Can I look up the business and find out if the business really exists in Massachusetts? I mean, they start getting into everything in your life. What are they looking for? An inconsistency. And they repeat their questions over and over again to the point where it's like, do I know my name? Like, do I know my date of birth? Like, it can make you question things that you know, that you know, that you know, that you know. But because of how they're questioning, it makes you think, am I lying about this? So that's how things like this work. And so the enemy is basically setting Eve up in this type of a situation where she's making her question what she really heard by phrasing it in such a way that it's not accurate right off the start. And so he said, you shall not, can it really be that God has said, you shall not eat from every tree of the garden? Verse 2, and the woman said to the serpent, we may eat the tree from the trees of the garden, except the fruit from the tree which is in the middle of garden. So she's right up to that point. She's accurate. She knows exactly what God has said. She's pretty clear in her answer to the enemy. Then she said, God has said, you shall not eat of it, neither shall you touch it, lest you die. She added to the words of God. God never said anything about don't touch the tree. He said, you shall not eat of it, lest you die. So she's adding this neither shall you touch it, lest you die. Now, the sages say, and we don't have the Bible for this, but it's possible. The sages say that what the enemy did is he pushed her into the tree. So she bumped into the tree, and he said, see, you didn't die. So what God said must not have been true. This is the danger of putting fences around the commandments. You know, if there's a good thing, there's a good side of putting a fence around a commandment to say, I don't even want to get close to that. But be careful that you don't say, God said to do this. That's why when we say the blessing over the Shabbat candles, we don't say, who has commanded us to kindle the light of the Shabbat candles. He didn't command us anywhere in the Word to light Shabbat candles. We do it in honor of Him, in honor of the Sabbath. And so we actually, at our house, say, who has commanded us to keep and to remember the Shabbat. That is the command. And in honor of keeping and remembering the Shabbat, we choose to light the candles. But we got to be careful of putting words in Yahweh's mouth that He never said, because that's where the enemy can get us tripped up. You understand that? So verse 4, but the serpent said to the woman, you shall not surely die. So now he's coming directly against what Yahweh said. Yahweh said, you eat of it, you're going to die. Serpent saying, you shall not die. Devil's the same today as he was. Just like Yeshua is the same yesterday, today, and forever, the devil's the same yesterday, today, and forever. He's the same as he was back in the beginning. He'll always come with something contrary to what the Word says, contrary to what Yahweh said. Yahweh says it's this way, he'll say it's not that bad. What's going on in this culture? You know, Yahweh said, you know, marriage is to be between man and woman. Devil comes and says, no, it doesn't have to be that way. It can be whatever you want. And then you get every man doing what is right in his own eyes. That's how the world gets into a mess. Verse 5, but for God knows that in the day you eat of it, your eyes will be opened and you will be like God, knowing the difference between good and evil and blessing and calamity. And when the woman saw that the tree was good, suitable and pleasant for food, and that it was delightful to look at, and a tree to be desired in order to make one wise, she took of its fruit and ate, and she gave some also to her husband, and he ate. Then the eyes of both of them were opened, and they knew that they were naked, and they sewed fig leaves together and made themselves apron-like girdles. And we know the rest of the story. You know, Adam's question, well, it was the woman you gave me. The woman's question, well, it was the serpent. Placing the blame on the other. But if she had stuck with what God said in the beginning, she wouldn't have been deceived by the enemy. She would have been able to hold her ground. But Yahweh gave them the warning in the beginning. And sometimes, you know, some things you would think, why would anyone want to do that? Like the warning labels. Why would anyone want to try to iron their clothes while they're on their body? Like, why would anyone want to, you know, stick their hand in a running machine? Why would anybody want to do that? Why would anybody want to sin the way we've sinned? Why you can step outside the situation. It's easy to stand outside of a situation and say, point our finger and say, why would they do that? Why have we done some of the things we've done? So Eve, really, and Adam ignored the warning label. back in the beginning. And by ignoring the warning label, they set death in place, sin and death in place for humanity. And so, you know, the season that we're in is a spiritually hazardous season. There's a lot of warning labels around if you're paying attention. You know, I was researching on the hidden dangers of Halloween, and when I first searched it, the first thing that came up was that Halloween poses a tripping hazard because the jack-o'-lanterns around, like just in the natural. So I was like, well, okay, but I was thinking like spiritual hazards, not tripping over jack-o'-lanterns as you walk down the street. But it is kind of true because Halloween poses a spiritual tripping hazard. And there's been a lot of believers, a lot of Bible-believing people who call themselves Bible-believing people and love God, and they've tripped over Halloween. And you don't want to trip over Halloween. Because in this case, tripping could land you on the edge of a dangerous spiritual cliff. It could mean a lot more than you bargained for. You give the enemy an inch, he'll take a mile in your life. And let's skip down to Genesis chapter 6. Sherry read this. She didn't write it. She read it on Sabbath. Genesis 6 is talking about, you know, when man began to multiply on the earth and all that. Verse 5, the Lord saw that the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every imagination and intention of all human thinking was only evil continually. I mean, that's a bad state, that every imagination, you know, we're given an imagination for a reason. Think of children. They can imagine some things that are out of this world, literally out of this world. It's like flying through the galaxies on a supersonic whatever, and bringing cars and having cars on a planet. Trust me, I hear this all the time. So they have imaginations, which is good. God gave us imaginations, and it says that whatever the mind of man can conceive, man can achieve. But that's not good when you get the enemy involved. Because then, when you get every thought, every imagination of his heart being wickedness continually, that's what ended up happening to the world. And so, and you know, we know God had to send the flood and everything, reset everything. But did that happen overnight? No. You don't go from thinking normally one day into absolutely thinking the most depths of wickedness the next day. Doesn't happen that way. It's a slow progression. Kind of like the frog in the pot. You know, you slowly heat up the water, the frog's not going to jump out because he's getting used to the temperature of the water, even though it's slowly cooking him. You know, and so the world has slowly been cooking the church. The world has slowly been heating things up at such a level that much of the church has been unaware of it. It's been subtle, although now things are no longer so subtle. But, you know, one thing you hear from people who are caught in the midst of some addiction is like, I never thought I would have gotten to this point. We've all heard people say that. Like, I never imagined that my life would get to this point. And, you know, people who are involved in some of the most imaginable, nauseating things in the depths of darkness, they didn't get there overnight. They probably would never have imagined they would have gotten there themselves. But it happens by yielding in a small way. You know, yielding to the enemy, even a small way, will always take you further than you ever intend to go. And it will leave you in more bondage than you ever knew that you would get to. He's not going to tell you right up ahead, hey, I'm going to tempt you with this, and then you're going to end up doing this, and then that's going to make you in this place where I have complete control over your life. The devil's not going to tell you that. Because then most people would say, yeah, no, I don't want any part in it. But if he can deceive you into thinking, well, a little bit of this is okay, and then slowly he starts mixing a little more in it, and a little more in it, and a little more in it, then you get used to it. You know, this culture is trying to normalize things that are not normal. You notice that? I mean, it started with homosexuality. That's been completely normalized. That seems, everybody's like, oh, that's, some people have 2 dads, some people have 2 moms. No, that's not normal according to the word. Now you say that in this culture, then you're called a hater and all that. It's like, no, I'm not hating the people. I'm saying it's not normal. That is not how creation was. You look in the animal kingdom, you don't see homosexual animals. No matter how many books they write about the 2 daddy penguins, you don't see that in the animal kingdom. It's not normal. But then now you get people who are dressing like animals, okay? And where that was seen as not normal before, now people are starting to slowly get used to the concept and trying to normalize it. So what's next? Polygamy? Bestiality? Like, where is it going to? They're already trying to normalize pedophilia. We know that. And they're trying to make it normal. And so we got to be watchful when things that were once shocking to us no longer bother us as much. That's when we know that that's a sign of being desensitized. And so, if you're desensitized to something, you're not as reactive to it, which has a positive and a negative thing. You don't want to be reactive in a sense of reacting to things in the wrong way. But there should be a sense of repulsiveness to some things that are so clearly against Yahweh's ordained plan for things. We shouldn't allow that edge to become dulled. We got to keep our sharp edge on that. And so, Halloween. Halloween used to be a cute time when, children would dress up and they go trick-or-treating, and they usually are dressed up as like pirates and cowboys and princesses, and it was a cute time. They just dressed up, went trick-or-treating, but the satanic origins of the holiday were completely covered over. Like, you didn't even notice it. It was all covered over under these niceties. But as we start drawing closer to the end, the covers are being more and more ripped off of the plan of darkness. Revelation 12:2 says, "But woe to you, O earth and sea, for the devil has come down to you in fierce anger, fury, because he knows that he has only a short time left." The time is short, and the enemy knows it. So he's pushing his agenda faster and more of a shocking way, such so that some more normal people, even in the world, can see it. Like, this isn't normal. What they're trying to get us to accept is not normal. And so the darkness is no longer trying to hide its agenda, but some people are still blinded to it. They've taken the kryptonite. Y'all know what I mean by kryptonite? John Bevere he had a whole book on killing kryptonite. Kryptonite, who was it that had the kryptonite? Superman? Oh, figures. Superman with his kryptonite. Superman had this, he had all this power and everything, but there was one thing that if he partook in it, it got rid of all of his power. It rendered him weak, just like a normal man. And so we got to identify in our lives what the kryptonite is. What is it that will render us useless for the kingdom of God? What is it that will nullify our witness? What is it that we need to not allow even a small amount of it in our lives? And so right now, the darkness of Halloween is no longer under the surface. It's out there plainly and clearly to be seen. The original nature of it is being more and more revealed. It went from the children dressing up as princesses and pirates to some of the most grotesque, horrifying. I mean, I saw one a couple years ago where it was like this little child, like maybe 5, 6 years old, dressing as somebody with her head on a platter. I mean, she shouldn't even know about that at that age. Like, the things that they're putting in front of the eyes of small children are enough to give adults nightmares, never mind children. They're at the most impressionable age. And what are they doing? They're dulling the children's sensitivity and senses to violence. And then they wonder why there's such an outbreak of violence going on in this world. and then parents wonder why they're dealing with things with their children. Christian parents, I'm not just talking about the world. Christian parents are wondering why they're dealing with stuff with the children when they're participating in stuff like this. But it's a heightened spiritual time right now. We're coming in 2 days is October 31st. And so, even for those of us who don't participate in the holiday itself, we might notice coming up to that, there's an intensifying and a ramping up of spiritual attacks. We can sense the forces. Now, they have no power over us unless we give it to them. But we can sense the intensity in the spiritual atmosphere, and that the demons of hell are aware of who we are. I was thinking about this the other day. There's a lot of things that go along with the spirits of darkness that people, I think, a lot of times don't even attribute to it. Even some physical, natural diseases really have their roots in the spiritual cause. There's been a lot of places where they go through deliverance. They have a lot of deliverance services, and they cast a devil out of somebody or get them freed from an oppressive spirit, and suddenly this disease they've been fighting for years is gone. Well, that was a spirit of infirmity. Remember when Yeshua talked about the woman who was bound by the spirit of infirmity and she couldn't even pick herself up? It was a spirit. It was not a physical cause. It was a spiritual cause that was behind it. Just like we know that fungus, we've taught in this church that fungus can mimic many other diseases, including cancer. Well, the devil, it has this like spiritual fungus, his demonic spirits. And for people who have been oppressed or possessed, in extreme cases, by these spirits, they can find themselves fighting things physically in their body. And it's not from a natural source. When you start finding that, like they went to many doctors and many physicians and can't find a cure, can't find a cause, maybe they should start looking at the spirit aspect of it. Where did you open a door? But, we got to be aware, what is one of the biggest things they say, especially during the fall, coming into the winter, a big thing that people deal with is depression, and they say it's, due to the lack of light, naturally, and that is part of it. But I would say it's a lot of times due to the lack of light spiritually, because of how heightened the time is, because of spiritually how things are. That can it can weigh down on things and cause, or certainly enhance, the natural. So I found this article, and then it was talking about how the devil knows that all this stuff is real, even if people don't think it is. People don't think that the spirit side is real. They think, oh, it's nothing. It's just a holiday. We're just having fun. But the founder of the Church of Satan, Anton LaVey, he's now gone, said two major holidays, Halloween and Walpurgisnacht, are celebrated by the Church of Satan. His statement was, I am glad that Christian parents let their children worship the devil at least one night a year. Welcome to Halloween. If the founder of the Church of Satan is saying that, we should take note of that. If the dark side is saying we're glad that Christians are allowing their children to celebrate Halloween, we don't want a part in that. According to a CBN News poll, 87% of believers feel that Christians should not celebrate Halloween, but 13% believe it's okay. Now, this was a while ago. I think it's increasing the other way. There's more and more, even in our own city, churches that are in some way participating in Halloween, which we're going to look in some scriptures in the Word as to why there's a problem with that. We've talked about this man before, former Satanist John Ramirez. He's been very outspoken against Halloween. Coming from the background he has, I think he'd know. He said, I was a general to the kingdom of darkness and witchcraft. I would sit with the devil and talk to him like I'm talking to you today. It was that kind of communication. Okay, so he knows what he's talking about. He warns that Halloween is not just about costumes and candy. There's a much darker reality. He said, sometimes people say, I celebrated Halloween 10 years ago, 15 years ago. I did it 20 years ago. But the door is still open. You just cursed your family from 3 to 4 generations. And so many Christians aren't even aware of it. Not even taking it seriously. You have to be aware that it's a curse. You have to go back to a place where you started. The year that you started that Halloween thing, the celebration when you started to encounter the dark side. Because more and more people are tapping into that dark side, even Christians. And we have no part in that. You have to go back to that same spot and renounce it in the name of Yeshua and ask God to forgive you so that God can have mercy and close that door so your whole family can move forward. See, it's impacting families. And that's why we talk about this every year, because it's about the families and children. What is this holiday targeting? The children. What is the left targeting right now? The children. They're coming for your children. They've stated it. They've been clear about it. They're targeting the most impressionable young ones amongst us. Why? Because then they get the entire generation. That's the plot of the enemy. He wants the entire next generation. But you know what? We got news for him. He's not having it. We're fighting for our children, and we're not going to let him have them. Ramirez, he once was sacrificing animals as part of satanic rituals on Halloween, doing all these things. But now he's strongly warning Christians against celebrating Halloween and participating in even what they call harvest festivals. No matter how you call it, it's part of the same origin. He said the only harvest we should celebrate is the harvest of souls. That is the truth. You want to celebrate a harvest festival, by the way, celebrate Sukkot. Even for the churches who are like, oh, well, we're going to call it a harvest festival. We're just going to do, harvest thing. Well, why do you have to pick October 31st to do it? Why? Pick Sukkot. There's a perfect example. You got a week long of a harvest festival. Go and have a party. But that's not what a lot of people are doing. But the media it makes the dark side of life appealing to the public through movies, through TV shows. They paint it as this romanticized drawing, like we want part of that. The books, the movies, even more and more of what Disney is putting out has more and more of the dark magic in it. And its whole goal is to desensitize people, to think, oh, that's okay, that's cool. And so, especially people who are thrill seekers, they tend to gravitate toward things like that for entertainment. The horror movies that are out there right now, you don't even want to see the advertisements for them pop up. This one pastor talked about how in Scripture there were people who were accustomed to being around psychics in the New Testament. There's a lot of talk about in the book of Acts about psychics and mediums and all that coming and basically repenting and taking their books, taking their arts, whatever, and burning them in the fire, like renouncing that. Now we have a church that's saying, well, maybe some of it is okay. The early church knew it wasn't. They were too familiar. Those cities, just go and look and see what... I think Rick Renner does a whole series on the churches and the locations that they were in the city of Ephesus, the city of Smyrna, city of Sardis. All these cities had so much, they were so steeped in Satanism, in things of the occult, that it was just part of the everyday life for them. So when he said, come out from among unbelievers, be separate from them, don't have any part in that, is what he's saying. But there's an unexplainable draw to it because there's some sort of a power, there's some sort of a spiritual, everybody is yearning for something spiritual, but not everything that's spiritual is of God. And that's what a lot of people don't realize. Well, I had this supernatural experience. Yeah, you can have a supernatural experience, but it might be from the enemy. Not every angel that appears before you is an angel from God. We know that the founder of Mormonism, he had an experience. He had an angel appear to him, but based on what the angel said, I would say it was an angel of light. It was an angel sent from the enemy to deceive. There's this woman, Jenny Weaver, who we've talked about it as well. She was an ex-witch. She also speaks out against Halloween. And she speaks about how the opening in her life to all this dark stuff that she was fighting was watching a movie about 4 witches in high school and how they had all this power. And she decided she wanted that. Again, targeting the young people, especially teenagers. And she was at a point in her life where her family situation wasn't great. She had an identity crisis. That's usually when the enemy can come. They're vulnerable. Let's give you into this. Same thing with John Ramirez. He didn't have a good father. And so when he was taken under the wing of this Satanist, this priest of the Church of Satan, whoever he was, it was like he had a father. It was like he had a family. There's so much deception out there and so much of a counterfeit family out there that the enemy is offering to people. And because they're so longing for a sense of belonging, they're falling into the dark side. You know, whether it be gangs or the depths of Satanism. But for a while, Jenny, she thought the path she was going down was great. But in reality, the enemy was dragging her deeper down a dark path. She lived with another witch, casting spells, having parties, doing drugs, and calling on spirits to rise and come into their bodies. Now, you can look at that and say, who would ever do that? John Ramirez did the same thing. He actually would go and go to funerals so that he could call the spirit of the dead person into him. Like, I mean, this is the depths of which people can go to in Satan. You don't want any part of that. So for 9 years, Jenny lived a life of bondage until Yahweh set her free. And so coming from that place, she also is warning Christians about the dangers of participating in Halloween. She said, what parents think is a one-day thing is not a one-day thing. It is only an open door that allows children, teens, and even adults, say if we allow this one day, then you'll find they'll allow horoscopes, horror movies, sorcery, witchcraft, healing crystals instead of calling on the name of Yeshua. You know, they start to tolerate all these things, and before you know it, they're in bondage, and they don't even know it. She said the devil is not backing off this generation. He's going after them more furiously, looking to steal, kill, and destroy everything he can before his time is up. You know, she also points out police officers and EMTs say that this day, Halloween, they have the most kidnappings, the most child abductions, and the most murders. Why? If that's a day that Christians should be celebrating, why would there be so much destruction and death happening on that day? Why do they tell you to keep your cats in? If you, especially have a black cat, make sure you keep them inside. Because there's all kinds of stuff going on out there. But for some reason, on this day, people in the police industry know something is going down. Why is that? The devil has that day marked. It's marked on his calendar. Just like we have Yahweh's days circled and marked on our calendar, Yom Kippur, Sukkot, Yom Teruah, those are marked on our calendar. Well, October 31st is marked on his calendar. One university professor was warning that poison candy and razor-filled apples are not the only things to worry about. The evening violent crime count on October 31st is about 50% higher than on any other date during the year. I mean, there's no coincidence in that. It's twice the daily average on October 31st. So if that alone, you just look at the statistics of that, that will tell you something. And I mean, now they're telling people don't even consume any treats that are not in their store packages. They're warning of drugs being in the food, and you got to X-ray all the food. It's getting more and more crazy out there. You're really physically and spiritually putting your children at risk if you're sending them out trick-or-treating. And it's not just the natural thing. John Ramirez said that in his opinion, the other events Christians hold instead of Halloween, such as trunk-or-treat nights, though even the world calls them trunk-or-treat, so what's the difference, are really no different. He said, do you know any Satanists who say, hey, we're going to come to Good Friday and we're going to hang out with the Christians and just call it a different name? Do you see Satanists doing that? No, never. And then John Ramirez also said, when you dress up, even if you're dressing up as an angel or a mermaid or whatever, for Halloween, you're giving the devil legal rights to change your identity. What is going on so much in this world right now? The identity crisis, the gender transformation. Jonathan Cahn, we've talked about this many times before, but he speaks of the return of the gods, the return of these ancient spirits that were there in the past, that controlled areas of the world in the past, and the same spirits are now manifesting today. It's the return of the gods. And so the goal is to, as it says in Matthew, deceive even if possible the elect. He's going to try to get even some of the elect to fall, says in Daniel. That's what his goal is. And you know, Jonathan Cahn, without getting too deep into it, he talks about this dark trinity that controlled the ancient world. And we're seeing it rise up in this whole cancel culture that's rising up in the day and age which we live in. You know, Western civilization came along, the gospel came along, and a lot of these dark spiritual principalities became like a house that was cleansed. But what does it say that if a demon has been cast out of a place, roams through the waterless places and seeks a place to find rest, and then if they come back and they find that the house has been cleaned out but nothing's been filled, then the state is worse. The state of that person is worse than it was at the first. And so when America started removing prayer from the schools, when they started cutting themselves off from God, they became that house that was cleansed and opened themselves up to the spirits that we're seeing manifest today. And there's a lot of spirits that are being manifest today. But the three demonic spirits that most transformed ancient Israel, that most led to Israel's demise, and in the ancient times, was Baal. He was the possessor. His strategy was to separate the nation from the word of God. Well, that's the first one that came into America by cutting off prayer from the schools. The next one was Mrs. Baal, the spirit that was referenced in the book of Judges, and it was Ishtar. Now Ishtar, you know, she's also called the Ashtoreth, you know, the Ashtoreth pole that they spoke of that were raised up all over the place. She was the goddess of sexuality, and she started the sexual revolution in Israel. The whole way that they worshipped her, everything that was wrapped around her, it resurrected through the Roman times. You saw it prevalent through there, and it's starting to return to the modern world. And what it started doing was weakening marriage. You know, when you got the family unit broken down, when you got marriage broken down, and then free sex became the god to be pursued. Everything went. America became filled with pornography. All this stuff started spiraling, and things that were once forbidden, they're now blatantly open for everyone to see. But there was another side of Ishtar that Jonathan Cahn talks about. She was a sorceress, and she had the ability to transform. She had the ability, she was a god that changes a man into a woman and a woman into a man. Does that sound familiar? The world that we're living in now is almost worshiping this idea of gender transformation, wants to erase the lines of gender and make you gender neutral, or whatever you want to be, you can be. That's the goddess Ishtar manifesting. And so the more she goes into the culture, you know, you had the Stonewall in 1969, the gay bar that was raided by the police. In the midst of all that was going on, that same night the Stonewall riots began. They began performing a dance that was called the Dance of Ishtar. That was like the opening, where it released the spirit into America. And then you had the Supreme Court, that declared marriage between man and women is okay. It's no accident that Pride Month is in June. That's when, the Mesopotamian calendar had Ishtar as the goddess over that season. There's so many connections. Go and look up Jonathan Cahn's book, The Return of the Gods. But all of this stuff, the power of metamorphosis, where Ishtar could transform a man into a woman and a woman to a man, she could change their identity. And so this is what John Ramirez is talking about. When you dress up, as John Ramirez said, you're giving legal right to these things. You're giving legal right to these spirits. Now you get people dressing up as animals. They're literally taking on spirits that they don't even realize that they're submitting to, that they're partaking in. And so, in this day of the return of the gods, we can't afford to be bowing ourselves to any idol, to any other god, to any spirit that is out there. We cannot be, we might be seen as restrictive or intolerant, but we cannot tolerate. We must be intolerant of anything of darkness in our house. We can't even allow a little bit of it. 2 Corinthians 6:14 through 16 in the Amplified says, "Do not be unequally bound together with unbelievers. Do not make mismatched alliances with them, inconsistent with your faith. For what partnership can righteousness have with lawlessness? Or what fellowship can light have with darkness?" How can Christians celebrate Halloween? What fellowship can light have with darkness? The Voice says, how can light participate in darkness? When you participate in any of the celebrations of Halloween, you're participating in darkness. It goes on to say, what harmony can there be between Christ and Belial, Satan? Or what does a believer have in common with an unbeliever? What agreement is there between the temple of God and idols? For we are the temple of the living God, just as God said, "I will dwell among them and walk among them, and I will be their God, and they shall be my people." I like the Message. It says, don't become partners with those who reject God. That would apply to our election now, too. Don't become partners with those who reject God. In any area of life. How can you make a partnership out of right and wrong? That's not partnership, that's war. Is light best friends with dark? Does Christ go strolling with the devil? Do trust and mistrust hold hands? Who would think of setting up pagan idols in God's holy temple? But that's exactly what we are. Each of us a temple in whom God lives. God himself put it this way, I'll live in them, move into them, I'll be their God, and they'll be my people. So leave the corruption and compromise. Leave it for good, says God. Don't link up with those who will pollute you. I want you all for myself. I'll be a father to you. You'll be sons and daughters to me, the word of the Master God. And that says it pretty clearly there. Ephesians 5:11 says, take no part in and have no fellowship with the fruitless deeds and enterprises of darkness, but instead let your lives be so in contrast as to expose and reprove and convict them. The EXB says, have nothing to do with, take no part in the things done in darkness which are not worth anything, but show that they are wrong. Expose them. How can you expect to stand up on one day and expose the works of darkness and say this is all bad, but then on the other day you're compromising and having some part in it? Well, it's watered down. I'm just going to do this little thing over here. No, you can't compromise. Some places a Christian does not belong, and some things a Christian should not participate in. We've said this before, but the origin of Halloween is traced back to the Celtic festival of Samhain, It's a tradition held at the end of summer when sacrifices were made to the gods in Druid tradition. The adherents believed that Samhain, the god of death, scattered evil spirits during this time throughout the world to attack humans. These evil spirits played nasty tricks as soon as the dark winter and the waning of the sun set in. That sounds like something we want to be a part of. To escape the attack, humans would assume disguises and make themselves look like the evil spirits too. That's where dressing up came from. Halloween is also a favorite time of year for witches or the advocates of Wicca. Wicca is the official religion of witchcraft. You shouldn't have any part in it. Wiccan adherents believe that on the night of October 31st, the separation of physical and spiritual realities is at its thinnest and least guarded, and so it's the best time for those who have necromantic abilities to speak to the dead. During the pagan festival, in the ancient times, food and animal sacrifices were offered up to the evil spirits that were believed to be coming from the other side. Even History.com talks about how fortune tellers would gather together in the dark. Now notice this is all in the dark. We're supposed to be in the light, not in the dark. Alongside the fires burning sacrifices to make predictions about the coming year. Isn't that something that's attractive? Why is it that fortune telling is so attractive? Because I want to know my future. I want to know what's going to happen. You know, getting ahead of myself here, but when you tap into that, when you go to that person and you give them the ability to read into your life, you're giving them the authority over your life. Now they can speak into your life, not just at that moment when you're standing before them, but now they can actually influence events in your life, and because you've handed the power over your life basically over to the enemy. We don't want any part in that. And so, you know, Christianity started spreading throughout Europe, and they started coming into conflict with these pagan beliefs, but then they tried to Christianize them. You know, All Hallows Eve, we're going to start trying to Christianize these pagan rituals, but the Bible explicitly forbids marrying these practices together. Like you can't, and when he said to the Israelites, when you come into the land, don't have any part with these people. Don't take on any of their practices. Deuteronomy 18:10 through 11, when you enter the land which the Lord your God gives you, you shall not learn to imitate the detestable things of these nations. Let no one be found among you who sacrifices their son or daughter, who practices divination or sorcery, interprets omens, engages in witchcraft, or casts spells, or is a medium or a spiritist, or who consults the dead. That's pretty clear. So when you're pairing up with a holiday that one of the biggest things is the ability of necromancy or contacting the dead, what gives? We shouldn't even be having any part in that. It's considered sinful throughout the Bible. And, you know, that's beside the point, that when somebody is contacting your dead relative, really what they're doing is they're able to talk to familiar spirits that are associated with that person that knew that person. You're not talking to your dead relative. You're talking to the spirits that are associated with them, which then gives them the right to track you. Not something that we want any part in. You know, as I said in the book of Acts, the church began to realize these types of spiritual activities were not consistent with their faith. It can't relate to each other. And so Christians were warned about opening themselves up to the spiritual danger associated with those things. You know, going to a psychic just for fun is like playing with fire. Even if you go to it with good intentions, one thing can lead to another, and you're going to find yourself in a dangerous situation. Don't even go there. In 2 Corinthians 11:14, Paul says, "And no wonder, for Satan himself masquerades as an angel of light." So mediums and witches and sorcerers and channelers, they're very good at looking like the light in a time of darkness. They look like they're trying to help people find their way. But in the end is the way of death. And so we don't want to have any part in that. And, you know, as I said, even John Ramirez talked about how when you seek someone out to read your future, give them legal authority over your life. And, you know, he he would go out and do all kinds of things on Halloween and other times. And one of the biggest things he did was he started preying on Christians in particular. Now take notice of this. You don't see the dark side going after the Buddhists. You don't see them going after the Muslims. You don't see them going after the Hindus. You don't see them going after these other world religions. Why is it that they come after the Christians? Because we're the ones who are the light that contrast them. The other world religions are basically in conjunction with the darkness. They have their origins in the darkness. But John Ramirez said he would go to clubs and he would begin looking at the clubs to pick out the Christians. The Christians don't belong in clubs, but there were Christians in the clubs. And he said he knew that if they were in the club, they were in the devil's playground. So he would specifically target them. He said, I knew if I could get to you and you had a beer or two in your system, I knew all I had to say was, listen, I have something to tell you today. And right now they would open up the door and say, what is it that you need to tell me? And now he got the gateway into their life. Don't even belong there. John Ramirez likens Halloween to having a one-night stand with the devil. You know, you go celebrate Halloween, you're in bed with the devil for one night. How can you do that? We can't be doing that. As he became more powerful in the demonic realm, John took warfare seriously. The devil told me that I had to go into the neighborhood in the spirit realm in order to weaken it in the natural. Whatever you kill in the spirit realm, you can kill in the natural. So I would leave my body and astral project myself into different regions, states, countries, and boroughs. And as I would go into the neighborhood, I would speak curses into the neighborhood, speak things that I wanted to happen into the neighborhood. Sometimes I would go into a neighborhood and I'd see this group of people in the spirit realm on the corner praying, holding hands, heads bowed, praying up a storm. And there was no accomplishment in that neighborhood. He couldn't do anything in those neighborhoods because those were believers who knew who they were. That neighborhood was sanctified and blessed through prayer. You couldn't touch it. But in the other neighborhoods, it was party time. So a believer who knows who they are and is not participating in the things of darkness is untouchable by the devil. It says a curse causeless will not alight. Doesn't matter how much they try to put curses on you. If you're walking in alignment with the light, if you're walking in alignment with the blessings, then the curse can't light on you. If you're in some way allowing it an opening, then you're going to find the curses in your life. When Ramirez was active in the witchcraft world years ago, he said he knew Christians were spiritually anemic. Can't be spiritually anemic. I knew Christians had the authority, the anointing, and the power to destroy the kingdom of darkness, but they didn't know how to use it. See, the demonic world knows who we are, but they know we don't know who we are. Just like the children of Israel, who saw themselves as grasshoppers. They weren't. The world saw them as these mighty conquering force because God was for them, but they didn't know who they were, and that rendered them useless. They didn't know how to execute. They can win a fight but not conquer anything. That's the sad thing about Christians at large. There's nothing wrong with Yeshua because Yeshua is all powerful, but the vessels in the church, the people in the church, people love God and they want to be free, but all we're doing is teaching a Yeshua that the devil has separated from the cross. In the church today, John says, there's a new age Yeshua. You're not going to win any battles with a new age Yeshua. You know, and with this whole woke Christianity, and Mom was watching this thing where it's this whole movement of evangelicals for Harris. Evangelicals who are like so in this woke mindset that they're blinded to the reality. They're blinded to what the word itself said. They're Christians in name only. 1 Corinthians 10, 20 through 21 says, I am suggesting that what the pagans sacrifice, they offer in effect to demons, to evil spiritual powers, and not to God at all. I do not want you to fellowship and be partners with diabolical spirits. Now this is a warning label. Back to our original thing, talking about warning labels. This is a warning label that Paul is giving. I do not want you to fellowship and be partners with diabolical spirits by eating at their feasts. You cannot drink both the Lord's cup and the cup of demons. You cannot share in both the Lord's table and the table of demons, thereby becoming partners with them. You know, some say having fellowship with devils. I don't want you to be in communion with devils. What is communion? We take communion each week. It's a form of fellowship between us and Yahweh. It's a covenant. Do you want to be having a covenant with the devil? No. You don't want to be in a covenant with the devil. You don't want to be participants with, you don't want to share anything with it. The voice says, so if you feast upon this food, you are feasting with demons. I don't want you involved with demons. Christians should avoid demons and avoid participating with them. So if you have a festival that's marked by demons and witches and the occult and death and destruction and all this stuff, why would a Christian have any participation with it? How can light have fellowship with darkness? In order for that to happen, you have to turn your light off. Now, your light can never be put out unless you allow it to be, but a Christian celebrating Halloween is in effect turning their light off, because otherwise it would drive out the darkness. Can't be participating with it. Ephesians 6 tells us about wrestling against flesh and blood. You know, we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against the spiritual powers. You can't be wrestling against the spiritual powers and celebrating with them at the same time. He can't do it. It's one of those weird warning labels. Like, don't dry your hair while you're sleeping. Like, you wouldn't think you have to tell people this, but you do. Exodus 22:18 says it pretty clearly. You shall not allow a witch to live. That's pretty strong. That's how strongly Yahweh feels about stuff like that. So we don't want any participation in that. Now there's Christians, there's even pastors who are saying it's okay. Saw this one website, the writer, pastor, he, quote, explains why certain Halloween activities can still be enjoyed despite their pagan associations. Why? Why would you want to enjoy anything with a pagan association? I mean, there's plenty of other things you can enjoy in this life without purposely picking a pagan association. Why? Like, would they say it's okay? It's perfectly okay. We can have some associations with some people in clubs. Like, you don't see that so much. Like, we can actually go to clubs and have some association, just as long as we're not doing those things. It doesn't make sense. But Halloween, God forbids the merging of pagan customs into our lives. Halloween, it's all about darkness. It's all about, it glorifies, it emphasizes dark characters, witches, wizards, vampires, ghosts, zombies. They're all associated with either death, Satanism, or the occult. That stuff comes with a warning label. And it's very clear. It's not even hidden. It's not like a warning label that you wouldn't guess. Oh, I didn't know that this would cause this. No. At the end of that road is death and bondage and destruction in your life. Don't look at it. Don't touch it. This is the warning label that's on that. Don't look at it. Don't touch it. Don't have anything to do with it. It will be corrosive to your life. It will be corrosive to your family. And it will end up exploding and causing you physical harm and left untreated death. You allow that to have any root in your life, don't open the door. What does it say? Give no place to the devil. Go look up, Rick Renner has a devotional called Give No Place to the Devil. And he gets into that really in depth about not opening the door to the devil. And so Halloween has a big sign that says danger, keep out on it. It's not just an innocent holiday for children. It's a trap that will collapse on you and open the door to darkness in your family. So we don't want any part in it. Not even a little bit. Amen? Well, I trust you've got something out of this message tonight. We will see you on Saturday at 11 a.m. Until then, you have a blessed week.